Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the bookshelf. I'm Grace, and today we're going to be talking about books that are just like Taylor Swift Folklore album. So each one kind of comes with an interesting story of how I got it. The Folklore album, first of all, is something that's very important to me. I learned how to sketch a lot of the tour visuals, and that was kind of my journey through drawing as well. And my favorite song on the Folklore album, before any of you ask, is The Last Great American Dynasty. I remember being at the concert because I went to the opening night show. Subtle brag. But I went to the opening night show, and my seats, we were in the 13th row. Very lucky number, if any of you know. 13 is a great number. And thinking to myself, like, this would be so great to read about. Like, it feels like a story, the song, because it's about, she buys a house and then they have parties there, and then she has parties there, but the woman who originally owned the house, Rebecca Harkness, also had parties there, and she was known for scandals and kind of being a little bit of lady of the town. People gossiped about her, but in the end she was the one with the confidence, and that's why the song is so special to me. And when I was deciding what I wanted to film today, I was going through my notes and I was like, you know, Folklore is a really special album in terms of storytelling. It's when we got to see a different side of, Queen Tay. And I wanted to talk about some books that I've read to kind of fill the gap, because the album was 5 years ago, but it doesn't feel 5 years ago. It feels like last week for me that I saw the Instagram announcement that it was coming out at midnight. And I remember losing my absolute ever loving mind. So the first one is Foster by Claire Keegan. This is one of my recent reads. I discovered it, I think, last year. And it was something short. I was looking for something to kind of fill, the TBR, get it off my TBR list. It's something short that you can get through in a very short amount of time. I think it's less than 100 pages, probably. And, I got through it in, I think, like less than a day, maybe like before lunch. And it's about a girl that gets like temporarily, as you can tell by the title, it's foster. It's about a girl who is put into a foster family in a very rural area, and she hasn't really experienced a lot of affection or kindness or like family dynamics that really nurture the child. And this book is really special to me because the foster care system is a big issue in America. Like how kids are treated, who gets accepted as a foster parent. And the book title, I think for me, has a double meaning because it's foster in terms of like, oh, foster child. But for me, it's also foster in terms of the verb, foster as in nurture, something that she never really received. The girl whose name I actually forgot, but the back, Hilary Mantel actually said, Foster confirms Claire Keegan's talent. Every line seems to be a lesson in the perfect deployment of both style and emotion. And the Irish Independent called it a real jewel. And, a lot of people love this book. Claire Keegan is someone that I constantly see in Barnes and Noble, her collections. And the only reason that I haven't bought all of them is because I haven't read all of them. And I wanted to make sure that I can fully appreciate each one and not just feel like I'm mass buying them for like a status symbol, Because books aren't status symbols, they're for growing. And the next book, oh my gosh, is one of my absolute favorites. If I could marry a book, it would be this one. Eleanor Park. This book is getting its own deep dive, in case you were wondering, because it was all over Barnes and Noble, and then it kind of just like disappeared. And I'm like, how dare you forget about this book? How dare you? This is unacceptable. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller, and excuse me. Anyway, Eleanor Park It's about an interracial teen couple in a suburb, I believe, and it takes place in the 1980s, which I think is a really natural time because the 1980s was known for a lot of like bold cultural movements. And so if you put an interracial couple now with all of our awareness through social media, it would be like, oh, well, I mean, it's an we've seen that before. But I feel like for the 80s, especially in like small communities, more closed-minded communities, this would have been more revolutionary then, and I feel like it really makes it new. And because it's teenage things, it really reminded me of like Cardigan and Betty and August. Even though it's not a love triangle book at all, it really reminded me of kind of, realizing that you feel those feelings for the first time. And alongside very other feelings like exile. You wouldn't think that that would apply to teenagers, but there's a part of this book that really reminded me of that song. And I actually got the cover with sprayed edges? Or is it splayed? Stayed? Sprayed? Splayed? I don't know anymore. It's called Nothing Before You Count. That's what the edges have on them. And it's so pretty. And the only reason that I don't display those on my bookshelf instead of the main like binding cover is because I want to be able to see the title because it reminds me of how much I loved reading this book and how much I wasn't expecting to love it. And this book really came as a surprise because I have a bit of a tempestuous history with young adult books in terms of like I don't like ones that focus heavily on um like smoosh, the smoosh. I don't like books that focus on the smoosh, and books that sort of like objectify teenagers. Like it feels weird. Like I know a teenager is the protagonist, but like it feels weird that that's in there. So that's uncomfortable. And this book, I was kind of like, oh, the cover's cute. It reminds me of Pretty in Pink from the 80s. I'll read it. I'll check it out. And then I completely devoured it in like a day. Like it was scary. And I remember because I listen to music while I read. I listened to Normal Thing. I listened to Normal Thing by Gracie Abrams while I was reading this. And I remember the outro just kept like repeating because I had the song on a loop. And I remember it would get to like the outro part where it was, had a good time, guess I'll see you. And it just kept repeating. And I was reading like the end of the book. And I will warn you, the last like 50 pages are like, get your Kleenex boxes because they are emotional. And I was having a hard time. And I remember, like, I'll never forget reading that. Like, I didn't have to write about it in like a journal in order to remember that. There are just certain things that you remember forever. And that was one of them. And it really reminded me of the, raw emotions of folklore. And so that's why I picked it for that. And then the next one is, it just felt like a natural pick when I was analyzing which books would fit, which is The Story Collector by Evie Woods. This was a book that I got at Target. It was on one of the end caps, and I felt kind of sorry for it because it looked like it had been forgotten, and like people just hadn't seen it because it was on the end cap, and people, they usually look in the main aisles. And I remember thinking, like, it looks so pretty because, like, the cover, it has like shiny parts to it. And I absolutely loved the idea of, like a fantasy book that's not just fantasy, it's also historical and it's also like a romance. So it's not just in one genre. And I feel like the author really stepped outside the bounds in that way. And I'll read you the back. It says 100 years ago, Anna, a young farm girl, volunteers to help an intriguing American visitor translate fairy stories from Irish to English. But all is not as it seems, and Anna soon finds herself at the heart of a mystery that threatens her very way of life. In present-day New York, Sarah Harper boards a plane bound for the west coast of Ireland. But once there, she unearths dark secrets that could change the course of her life. And it takes place in a quiet village, and the author, Evie Woods, also wrote a best-selling book, The Lost Bookshop, which I also have not read yet. And I actually read this, I believe, on Christmas Eve. I started on Christmas Eve 2024, and I remember the story starts on Christmas Eve, and it really felt like a sign that like the book had found me at the right time, because I know that that's a bit superstitious. Books are meant to find you at a certain time. And if you haven't read a book, it's because it's not the right time. It's not because you're lazy or procrastinating reading it. It's because it hasn't found its way into the right moment of your life. And it will. And this book definitely did on Christmas Eve. And it really reminds me of the nature based elements of folklore as far as like exile, My Tears Ricochet. There are very somber notes in the book, but the happy times are very, I want to say, understated. They more like fade in. Like if you haven't noticed it, it'll just sort of hit you in the face. And it reminds me of like peace and hoax and kind of the B-side songs. Like I've heard people say that there are B-side songs to folklore, and I'm like, how dare you? Like, don't talk to me. I don't like people who say that. So don't say that, okay? And for the next one, we have The Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. She is one of my favorite modern British authors. I think that she doesn't get a lot of credit because she writes, like chick flick novels or chick lit. And a lot of her books would work very well as like late 2000s movies, kind of like Confessions of a Shopaholic, you know, Mean Girls, that kind of like just feel good like 2000s movie. I feel like she would really excel at that. And this one is about a librarian who decides to start like a book bus in a rural town, and there are all these quirky townspeople, and there are pubs, and you get to read about like the countryside and the developing children in the area who start reading again, and it's really special. And I remember I found this at the exchange shelf at my college library. There was an exchange shelf, and I picked it up because I thought that the cover looked cute, and it actually looks very similar to the Story Collector cover as well. But I remember picking it up, and I remember just randomly reading it because, I had some free time. I finished some homework early and I started reading it, and I absolutely loved it because I love anything that takes place in London or assorted European countrysides. I love that kind of story, and I love the emphasis that's not on romance but on more friendship through careers. And it's less about like, oh, hot sexy farmer with the axe, and he chops wood, and he wears flannel. That really was important for me to read at the time when I was starting college. And I absolutely love this book, and it reminds me not of just the countryside elements but of the sort of coming of age elements. I think this song best resembles Cardigan, and if you read this book you will definitely know why. I think that the author is really good at putting the idea of like a corporate job and like sustainable joy through a creative passion. I think that she puts those two in juxtaposition, and it works very well in like hooking the reader and keeping you reading throughout all the different sections of the book and plot lines. But it is called Lady Almina and the Real Downton Abbey, and it's about the woman and the family who lived in, I believe it's Highclere Castle in Britain, where the Downton Abbey show was actually filmed. And it's about the family that lived there, and it's about the staff, and it reminds me of The Last Great American Dynasty, but it also reminds me of The One, because I feel like The One was a very interesting song to hear from Taylor Swift on Folklore, because you wouldn't think that someone of that, pop star status would have, regrets or would wonder things because, her career is flourishing, and, she has best-selling albums and tours and everything. But I think The One was a really interesting song because it shows that no matter what, like, social status you have, you'll always wonder what could have happened with that one person or what might have happened if you'd done something differently, you know? Digging up the grave another time, as she says. And in this book, it analyzes a family that was very sort of put on the outside by the town, raised on a pedestal of being the rich family, being the status symbol family, setting an example through fashion, through culture. And it really shows that they're more accessible than we thought, especially in the age where nonfiction can be written. And the real life inspiration and setting for Julianne Fellowes' Emmy Award-winning PBS show Downton Abbey, drawing on a rich store of materials from the archives of Highclere Castle, including diaries, letters, and photographs, the current Lady Carnarvon, a name, has written a transporting story of this fabled home on the brink of war. I feel like that's going to be really interesting because I haven't actually read this. I've done a lot of research in Downton Abbey, and so that's why I felt prepared to mention this in my draft list for which albums are similar to folklore and which books you can read to sort of reset those vibes in your life. But I feel like that really symbolizes the last great American dynasty and the one. And Eleanor Park, I feel like the song that best fits this book specifically is Betty and also Peace. I feel like Peace really works because their relationship is very tumultuous in terms of the fact that they have a lot of opposition, their families are very different, their lifestyles are very different. And Peace works really well in summarizing the fact that they love each other and they have these deep feelings that, since they're teenagers, they've never really felt that strongly before, but they still want to give it a chance and they still want to make it work because they care about each other. And that's really, really special. And that's the mark of a great young adult book. And that's why it's one of my favorites. And then just to recap on Foster, I feel like the song that most fits this one is The Lakes, because the lake symbolizes the fact that you want to run away, but you want someone to run away with, and you want someone to get away with. And Foster really, I think, expands on that because this is a girl who was not treated well by her family and gets put with another family where she gets to experience a whole new way of life through love and belonging and nurturing and fostering, which is, I think, partly where the title came from. I think the author was making that a little bit of an Easter egg, and I definitely picked up on that when I read it. And The Lakes, the song works so well for the book because it also means that the girl has found a family that she cares about. She's found something in life that she feels like she belongs to. And that's why I think it's the perfect song for the book. And that if that's your favorite song on the album, this book is definitely the one for you. And those are my picks. Those are my picks for the Folklore album. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you for hanging out at the bookshelf again. And if you're new, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you liked hanging out for the first time. And definitely, if you want a deep dive on Eleanor Park, that will be coming at some point. So make sure to keep an eye out. And please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.